The snow comes down in thick, wet sheets, the kind that swallows sound and smothers engines. Through that white noise, a column of armour grinds forward, tracks churning slush, headlights winking like cold eyes, motorcycles weaving at the flanks like hungry wolves. It's not a probing raid or a quick dash to test the line. It's bigger, louder, and stranger than anything Pokrovsk has seen inside its city limits since this siege began. 30 vehicles, give or take, nose into the storm and into the kill zone. Then the ground itself turns traitor. Mud grabs steel, snow blinds optics, and the ambush begins. By nightfall, the city that used to move the Donbas hums with a different kind of logistics. Medevacs, counter-drone teams, and artillery batteries cycling fuses with the rhythm of a heartbeat. Ukrainian units pick their targets. Loitering munitions find warm engines, and the white field around the assault blooms with black smoke. This is Pokrovsk in winter, a supply town that became a battlefield, a railway junction recast as a maze of firing lanes and kill boxes, where today's mechanized lunge collides with months of urban fortification and an army that understands the weather better than any general. Ukrainian commanders call it the largest mechanized thrust inside the city so far, an assault that tried to muscle through the southern approaches and punch toward the north. It didn't. The wrecks still burn in the slush. To understand why this moment matters, you have to rewind to why Pokrovsk matters. On a map, it looks like a hinge. Roads and rail spoking out toward Kramatorsk and Sloviansk to the north, toward Kostiantynivka and Drushkivka along the fortress belt, and westward into the gateways of Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Before the siege tightened, it fed entire sectors with fuel, shells, and human movement. Medics, engineers, sappers, the unglamorous traffic that wins wars. Its capture wouldn't just put a red flag on a big dot. It would let that flag use Pokrovsk as a staging ground to pivot north or to ram into the lighter, flatter country to the west. That's why analysts have called it a pressure point on the entire Eastern Front, not just another block of ruins on a bleak winter feed. And that's why this assault's shape, its scale, its choreography felt different. For months, Russia has relied on wave tactics and small assault groups creeping in the seams between trenches and tree lines, saving armor for when the odds look friendlier. Today, they came with armor anyway. Around 30 vehicles, armored carriers mixed with lighter trucks and even bikes, pushed from the south to the north in a bid to breach Ukrainian lines inside the city itself. The unit on the Ukrainian side, the 7th Rapid Response Corps, told reporters that previous pushes used just 1 or 2 vehicles to shepherd infantry. Today was a spike, an attempt to force the lock. The lock held. Weather, mud, and a swarm of drones turned columns into choke points and choke points into scrap. It's a reminder that mechanized warfare lives and dies by terrain. Sometimes the most lethal weapon on the battlefield is poorly drained ground. If you're still watching, by the way, you're exactly the kind of viewer this channel is built for. The detailed, patient ones who don't just want explosions, you want consequences. So consider subscribing now so you don't miss the next breakdown. Let's get back to how this changes the game. Let's talk about that ground. Winter on the steppe is a shapeshifter. One day it's a frozen highway. The next, it's porridge. Drones love the low ceiling and the way heat plumes glow against snow. Vehicles hate the way tires and tracks dig and find nothing but more sludge. There's an old saying about generals and weather. Amateurs study tactics, professionals study logistics, and the truly paranoid keep a weather app open. If you're rolling heavy into Pokrovsk right now, you're rolling into an algorithm that favors small units with eyes in the sky and artillery on speed dial. The footage from today's attack, stalled vehicles, burning chassis, men sprinting through sleet while quadcopters buzz like wasps, looked like a live fire case study in how winter punishes mass. And it punished it here. Zoom out to the diplomacy that hovers over these streets. This clash unfolded as the pressure campaign on Kyiv to swallow an unfavorable peace plan picks up speed. That isn't a coincidence, it's leverage. A city like Pokrovsk isn't just a battlefield, it's a bargaining chip. If Moscow can claim it cleanly, it can walk into any negotiating room and say, the map is shifting our way, and it's going to keep shifting. If Kyiv holds, if it trades ground in alleys for attrition on the approaches, then it can make its own case. Look at the costs of every block. Look at the price your opponent is paying to move a kilometer. The street-level fight always echoes in the room where men count provinces like poker chips. On the Russian side of the line, the messaging machine is already in overdrive. Moscow said weeks ago that Pokrovsk, Krasnoarmeysk in its Soviet-era naming, had fallen. Kyiv answered with coordinates and units still operating north of the rail line, holding roughly a wedge of the city and pushing back where the terrain allows. The top Ukrainian commander detailed tactical withdrawals from exposed positions outside the city, but emphasized they still hold urban ground and a broad strip westward that anchors supply routes and artillery positions. The fog isn't just meteorological, it's informational. In that fog, the hard facts are today's wrecks, and the simple statement that Ukrainian troops are still fighting inside the city's northern sector. If this city fell, and that if carries more weight than a main battle tank, it would be the most consequential change to the map in nearly 2 years. A headline-size gain to wave in front of cameras and parliaments. Some outlets have framed it as the largest city Russia would have seized since Bakhmut in May 2023. Others, including wire services tracking this front month by month, stressed that it would be the biggest single prize since the fall of Avdiivka in early 2024. Splitting that hair is less important than the reality behind it. Capturing Pokrovsk would be a qualitative shift, not just a quantitative notch, and it would rewrite the next quarter's planning slides for both sides. There is also the matter of Mirnorad, Pokrovsk's neighbour and partner in pain. Russian commanders have called it out by name, talking up encirclements and orders to finish the job. Why? Because wars are a geometry problem. If you tighten the loop around Mirnorad while battering Pokrovsk, you squeeze Ukrainian supply routes from 2 directions and complicate every rotation of men and munitions. It's a classic Jaws maneuver, and it's playing out under the same cloud ceiling and over the same cratered roads. But again, claims of clean wraps and neat encirclements meet the reality of stubborn defence. Geography matters, but so do sappers and artillery observers who've memorised every kilometre post. From the Ukrainian perspective, the defence of Pokrovsk has been a study in economy of force, backed by technology. In practice, that means command posts that move every few hours, drone operators who know how to hide under the spiderweb of netting, and logistics chiefs who've turned civilian vans into lifelines. It means mine belts that funnel armour into predictable lines, where gunners stand ready with top attack tricks and pre-treated target boxes. It means living with the constant whine of FPVs, friendly and enemy, and learning to sense when that sound changes. Above all, it means treating every vehicle that dares to cross an open street as a self-reporting target. If you want a glimpse of the tactical puzzle today's attackers ran into, think about the city as concentric shells. The outermost shell is observation, drones and spotters sniffing for movement and heat. Inside that is precision fire, mortars, guided shells, and roving teams with anti-armor missiles slung across their backs like guitars. Inside that is the street, hedgehog positions in blasted buildings, overlapping fields of fire down alleys, and ambush points whose furniture is rubble and rebar. To break that geometry, you have to move fast and in sync, vehicles keeping pace with dismounted infantry while electronic warfare tries to blind the eyes above. Today, they didn't. There is an irony to the way Russia choreographed this push. For months, analysts watched a shift away from massed armour, too vulnerable to cheap drones, too fragile against accurate artillery, and toward smaller, foot-slogged infiltration. Those tactics were costly, but they preserved vehicles. The return to a larger mechanized push inside the city limits suggests either an attempt at surprise through scale, or a bet that weather would declaw drones long enough to survive the crossing. Either way, the bet didn't cash. The only thing worse than moving armour in bad ground is moving it in bad ground that the defender has already zeroed. We also need to be honest about why Pokrovsk is still contested at all. It is not because the defenders miraculously outgunned their attackers. It's because the battlefield itself imposes friction. On any given day, entire axes can bog down because a single culvert fails or a single railhead stays under fire. It's because resupply on both sides now depends on narrow windows when drones are grounded and artillery is busy elsewhere. And it's because each block of this city has been transformed from a place where people lived to a place where cover, concealment, and fields of fire have been mechanically optimized by months of combat. The strongest platoon in the world looks small inside a proper urban defense. If Pokrovsk is a hinge, then Kramatorsk and Slovyansk are the door it holds shut. A fall here would swing pressure toward both, psychological pressure first, operational pressure next, while opening angles into Dnipropetrovsk's east. Think railways, think bridges, think the unsexy math of truck tonnage per day. There's a reason Russian engineering units have been working to repair and extend their own rail lines closer to the front. Steel wheels move war faster than tires ever can. And Pokrovsk is one of the few places where the geometry of rail, road, and survivable staging ground align. So what happens next? In war, the next move is usually the last move, repeated with tweaks. Expect another push, maybe not with 30 vehicles, maybe with fewer and under heavier jamming, probing the same avenues of approach while artillery tries to plow new lanes. Expect more smokescreens, more night attempts, more motorcycles trying to be ghosts. Expect Ukrainian units to flex then bite, yielding where a street isn't worth blood, counterpunching where they can turn a traffic circle into a trap. And expect the information war to run hot. Claims of capture, counterclaims of presence, each side trying to move the political needle while the tactical situation inches. There's also the manpower question, the one no one likes to answer on camera. Street fighting eats people, in both directions. The Russian military has shown a willingness to trade bodies for meters, and the last year suggests they will keep that trade going as long as their political leadership finds it tolerable. The Ukrainian military, fighting on home ground with a thinner demographic cushion, is forced to fight smarter, striking where it can impose disproportionate loss and refusing fights where the cost-benefit tilts the wrong way. Today's result, a repelled assault, vehicles stuck and burning, fits that operating logic. Make the enemy pay in steel before you have to pay in blood. For the civilians who once took the 6:30 to Kramatorsk or the evening bus to Dnipro, this is all an abstraction. Their city, bright with sodium lamps and factory sirens not so long ago, is now a warren of basements, checkpoints, and crater lakes. Some stay, even as volunteers and police beg them to go. There's stubbornness in that, and love, and sometimes just the cold math that there's nowhere else to go and nothing else to be. The war makes logisticians of everyone. In Pokrovsk, it's teaching a new generation what it means to count your steps, your batteries, your breaths, and it's showing them, again, how quickly a metal city can rust when the front comes to town. Another aside, because history's greatest prank is repeating itself. When massed armor meets prepared urban defense, the city tends to win, slowly, expensively, in horrible increments. Tanks were built for the open. Cities are ambush machines carved in brick. The side that forgets that writes long condolence letters. The side that remembers it keeps buying shovels, drones, and small unit leaders with good instincts and better radio discipline. If you're keeping score at home, note how often today's successful defenses talk about a sergeant with a tablet rather than a general with a plan. Alright, back to the stakes. If Russia takes Pokrovsk and stabilizes its hold, it gets a launch pad and a headline. The launch pad points toward rail-enabled offensives, in which supply lines are shorter, movement faster, and artillery deeper. The headline reinforces the story Moscow wants to tell international audiences, that Donetsk will be taken piece by piece until Kyiv signs something with a seal on it. If Ukraine holds, or even just slows the capture to a crawl, it keeps the Donbas fortress belt hinged, buys time for rotation and rearmament, and keeps political oxygen flowing from capitals where domestic patience needs battlefield proof. Both sides know this, which is why neither is treating Pokrovsk like just another dot. What about those whispers of diplomacy? They're more than whispers. The assault unfolded as Washington leaned toward a peace framework widely read as friendlier to Moscow's current map than Kiev would like to admit. That timeline matters. Every day a city like Pokrovsk holds beats a metronome in the background of those talks. Every wrecked vehicle in a snowbank is a bullet point in a brief somewhere in a very warm room. And every drone strike that turns a column around argues, in its own quiet way, that maps are not inevitable. They are made, contested, revised, and sometimes erased by men who have learned to move between basements at a sprint. None of this is to say Pokrovsk cannot fall. It can. Urban fights are not magic. They are attrition. They depend on ammunition stockpiles that must be moved under fire, on engineers who must build and rebuild obstacles with mortar rounds walking toward them, on medics who keep enough men alive to keep the line from snapping. They depend on electronic warfare units keeping just enough of the sky dark, on drone pilots finding just enough gaps in the jamming, and on an unending routine of small, relentless, unphotogenic tasks. If any one of those breaks, streets start changing hands faster than press releases can keep up. But even if that happens, if the worst headline prints, what matters next is whether the fall becomes an opening or a pocket. A captured Pokrovsk that's under constant interdiction by artillery and drones is a forward staging ground with a short half-life. Rail yards within range are rail yards on borrowed time. A captured Pokrovsk that opens a true corridor westward, on the other hand, would pressure the next cities in the belt and threaten to peel the front back from Dnipropetrovsk's corner. That's the operational coin toss commanders are staring at tonight as they update their maps and wipe snow off the radio housings. There's one more truth Winter insists on. Nothing is static. Lines flex. Dead ground becomes good ground when the freeze finally sticks. Mud roads become ice roads, and the heavy kit that bogged today can glide tomorrow, until the thaw turns it all back into soup. The side that anticipates the next phase change gets a free play. The side that assumes yesterday's rules still apply gets another smoking wreck for the drone photographers. In that sense, today's failed mechanized thrust is both a warning and a lesson. Armor can and will matter again when the freeze bites properly. The defender knows it. The attacker knows it. The calendar is another combatant. For viewers tracking this war from afar, Pokrovsk may look like just another name in a long list. Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Kreminna, Kupiansk, on and on. But cities aren't interchangeable. Each has a logic. Pokrovsk's is logistics, rail spurs, road nets, and the geometry of movement across the Donbas. That's why you saw a rare mechanized push inside the city today. That's why you're seeing the defenders throw mud, metal, and ingenuity into jamming that gear. And that's why the fight here will echo outward, into diplomacy, into morale, and into the next ugly, necessary argument about who gets what and where the line will sit when the snow melts. There's no integrated tactical manual for motorcycles in a blizzard against quadcopters. If there were, it would have exactly one line: don't. So where does this leave us tonight? With a city that still fights, with attackers who just learned, again, that massed movement inside urban terrain requires more than horsepower, with defenders who will spend the night restitching their lines, moving their guns, and watching the weather forecast with the attention most people reserve for championship scores, and with a strategic picture that sharpens, however painfully, into this. Pokrovsk is not purely symbolic, it's a fulcrum. If you're drawing up wagers in some hypothetical war room, here's the sober bet. More assaults will come, shaped by ground and sky. More claims will be made, shaped by cameras and summonses. More maps will be updated at 3 in the morning while the snow taps on windows and somebody's coffee goes cold. What matters is the math of losses and the geometry of supply. Today, that math favoured the defence. Today, the geometry punished a column that trusted weather to hide it and found weather turning on it instead. We'll see what tomorrow's frost decides. And here's the question I'll leave you with, the one that generals and diplomats are asking in their own ways. When a logistics city becomes a battlefield, Who adapts faster? The side that thinks in terms of squares on a map, or the side that thinks in terms of minutes, meters, and mud? The answer in Pokrovsk will help write the next chapter of this war, whether on paper in a conference room or in the snow where the wrecks still smoke.